Hello, I'm Allison. I'm one of the three archivists that look after the Sainsbury Archive here at Museum of London Docklands, and today I'm going to talk to you about art material that's kept in the Sainsbury Archive that was created by Sainsbury's whilst they built their shops. So although it may not be one of its most obvious uses, the Sainsbury Archive contains a surprisingly large amount of information about post-war public art. I'm going to cover a little bit about how the company has used art whilst building new stores, especially between the years 1960s and 1990s. In the collection, there are numerous photographs of the murals, reliefs and sculptures which have adorned the company's branches and car parks over the years. The earliest Sainsbury's branches were decorated using tiles and mosaics with both artistic and hygienic merit. These tiles were made by the renowned Staffordshire pottery Mintons. They could be considered to be tiny artworks in themselves. However, this talk is going to focus on works less integral to the functioning of a shop and more about standalone public art, which only became prevalent in the second half of the 20th century. It's not an exhaustive list, but it gives an overview of the different types of public art Sainsbury's has commissioned and the range of artists who have executed it. It's unclear exactly when public art was first considered in the planning of Sainsbury's branches. A report on European food retailers in the December 1957 issue of the in-house staff magazine JS Journal may have provided some inspiration, highlighting a Rotterdam supermarket rebuilt after the Second World War with a remarkable piece of modern sculpture outside it by well-known artist Naum Garbo. This work was said to express feelings of hope. However, by 1966, sculpture was deemed to be important enough to the company to launch a competition for a piece to stand outside their new Chelsea branch. Director Robert Sainsbury, like other members of his family, was a keen patron of the arts, and he was joined on the judging panel by such British art world luminaries as Sir Rowland Penrose and Henry Moore. The winning work by artist John Ragg was of two organic shapes cast in aluminium. It stood on a low plinth reaching a height of about 10 foot 6 inches above ground level. The upright shafts suggested a living form, were left matte and lightly textured. In contrast, the domed surfaces, which met at the apex of the two branches, were geometrical in character and were highly polished. In order to construct this sculpture, John Ragg created an armature of welded mild steel rods and covered them with sheets of metal. On top of this, he covered the skeleton with a cladding of plaster of Paris. Ragg built up or cut away at the plaster until he reached the shape he wanted in the final version. When Ragg was happy with the shape, it was cast and then burnished and textured by hand with a variety of power tools. It was always intended that children would climb over this artwork as a public sculpture outside the branch. Other branches that opened in the 1960s featured works quite different in style. Shoppers in Chichester and Coventry, for example, could enjoy detailed maps of their local areas by John Skelton, a nephew and apprentice of Eric Gill, who's best known for creating Guild Sans, a font used by companies such as LNER, John Lewis and the BBC. The map at the Chichester branch showed the local area cut in hard Swedish pearl granite and then painted and gilded. The map was both decorative and informative. Other Sainsbury's branches in the area were indicated. There was a scale for children to measure their height against in years up to the age of 10. A royal helicopter headed towards Cowes and nearby Isle of Wight, and a racing car numbered number 7, which was Stirling Moss's number, zoomed towards their nearby Goodwood circuit. The map at Coventry shows the growth of the city. It was devised from information gathered from the city architect and the old reference library. A coloured rough was presented for discussion and accepted by Sainsbury's with one or two alterations. They suggested the provision for expansion of Coventry as a city, and then obviously to add the Sainsbury's branch. A new tracing was then prepared with all this material on it. It was then enlarged to full size using a photocopier. The blocks of polished granite, which had been chosen for the final map, were coated with emulsion paint and then the map was traced onto these in sections. The basic cutting was done with a machine chisel and was finished by hand. Most of the painting and gilding was also done in the studio. The sections were then brought to Coventry and erected in position in a steel frame, and Mr. Skelton came along and spent a couple of days finishing it all off. During the next couple of decades, Sainsbury's would commission murals depicting a town's history and industries more regularly than any other type of public art. Several were by husband and wife team Henry Collins and Joyce Pallett. The couple met at the Colchester Art School in 1932. They married in 1938 and began working on public art commissions together in 1948. They completed over 60 projects in a partnership that lasted over 60 years. Sainsbury's first commissioned these artists' work for a branch in their native Colchester, following a chance meeting with the architect on a train. Early in 1969, when the Colchester branch was being built, the local planning authorities restricted the amount of glass that could be used on the frontage. The site faced a fairly narrow pedestrian walkway, and a large expanse of glass was a possible hazard. This left Stanley Bragg, the local architect working on the job, with the problem of what to use instead. A brick wall lacked imagination and would not give shoppers a very attractive prospect. He'd seen examples of murals cast in concrete and how effective they could be, but he was not sure how they were made or who made them. By chance, he met Henry Collins on the London train one morning. He knew that Henry and his wife had designed a number of murals using canvas or plastics, so he discussed with him the possibility of working in concrete. The idea of a concrete mural depicting some of the history of Colchester was put to Sainsbury's management. Obviously, they said yes, and the Collins were commissioned to design it. Henry and Joyce worked with Stanley Bragg on a process for producing the expanded polystyrene moulds from which to cast the panels that make up the murals. Chance took a hand again when it was discovered that Hutton's, the building firm working on the site, were also specialists in producing decorative concrete. The couple worked with Hutton's builders in Birch, Colchester, to create 24 separate panels, all made in concrete. This example of arts patronage set by Sainsbury's was innovative, imaginative, and exactly suited to the couple's philosophy. Joyce undertook rigorous historical research into the site, so the designs had a strong sense of local place, whilst Henry took the lead in drawing and designing. They understood the public context of the work and employed an array of unlikely tools, including spoons, spanners, and even a nutmeg grater to produce a variety of finishes. The texture of the work was important to its overall look, whilst also discouraging graffiti, as the couple were well aware that the site of the mural would be in easy reach of anyone wishing to deface it. They made the panels in precast models, initially made of polystyrene, developing their designs in reverse and pouring concrete onto the moulds. Later, the couple designed wooden moulds with a releasing agent, enabling the moulds to be used again. They paid particular attention to how colour was integrated into other materials. The Collins were innovative with their use of colour, often introducing mosaic tiles to the mould that was then transferred during precasting or painting colour directly onto the finished mural. Each commission was unique, and they made a repeat motif for regular clients. For example, for Sainsbury's, they used a sun or wheel panel design, which you can see on this image. The design for the Colchester branch includes a number of coins and seals, which were on display at the local museum. The top panel on the mural is made up from 2 coins and 1 seal. One coin on the mural shows the Roman Empress Helena. Helena is a figure of particular interest to Colchester. The daughter of King Cole, who reigned over Britain in the early part of the 3rd century, she was born in the town in AD 242. When Helena was 18, the Emperor Constantius sailed to Britain and besieged Colchester for 3 years, and only raised the siege in exchange for Helena's hand. The branch opened in 1969, and the mural is still in situ today. Following the successful reception of the work in Colchester, Sainsbury's commissioned similar murals for branches around the country, including Gloucester, Hitchin, Worcester, and Cowley. Over time, these murals have gained recognition as heritage assets, with some being relocated for preservation when their original supermarket sites have been redeveloped. This is an image of the mural at the Hare Lane entrance of the Gloucester branch. It was 46 foot 7 inches long and 7 foot 4 inches high. The panels made reference to incidents or objects in the city's history. You can see a bishop and a Norman soldier as the cathedral was founded by the Normans. A ship on a token represents those that were issued at the opening of the Gloucester-Berkeley Canal in 1795. Then to the left of this is a coracle and paddle, a type of boat used on the Severn for fishing. References to the rich surrounding land also appear. Wheat symbolises the importance of the grain trade on the town, and somewhere there's also a Gloucester Old Spot pig. This is the image of the mural in Hitchin, showing 3 symbolic figures: Offa, King of Mercia, Tovey, First Lord of Manor, and Balliol, Lord of Hitchin. It also includes images of the local industries, including brewing, coopering, and tanning. This is the mural on the front of the shop in Worcester that opened in 1976. This depicts the history of Worcester from pre-Roman times right through to Edward Elgar. And the final image of the Collins murals, this was designed for the Sainsbury's at Cowley branch, which you can see has a transport theme. A sizable work above the public library added interest to the Sainsbury Centre in Sutton Coldfield, another example of the large pedestrian-friendly shopping precincts which were becoming increasingly common by the 1970s and offered significant scope for public art. So far, unfortunately, the archive has yielded little information about this piece compared to other murals, and sadly, we don't even know who the artist is. Another related art form to this is also murals is reliefs, and examples appear at some Sainsbury's branches. 8 panels by Stephen Sykes, whose previous work ranged from D-Day camouflage to a chapel at Coventry Cathedral, adorn the branch at Braintree, which opened in 1982. These panels were designed to simulate shop windows. They were installed to help relate the modern store to the streets of the old town and to tell stories of shopping and trading in Braintree. They are also indicative of the old trades and crafts of Braintree, including one representing a medieval market to acknowledge the previous presence of a market on the site. Sainsbury's produced a leaflet which was available to the public explaining the story of all 8 panels. Another early 1980s Essex branch included reliefs with a less common historical theme, this time highlighting Sainsbury's own heritage. Shoppers who glanced above the J. Sainsbury sign at the Rayleigh Weir branch saw one of 2 concrete depictions of John James and Mary Ann Sainsbury, the founders of the company. These were also the work of Essex-based Henry Collins and Joyce Pallett. When the branch was redeveloped, one of these reliefs was moved to a more prominent position next to the entrance so shoppers could see John James and Mary Ann in all their glory. And yet another example from 1988 are the ceramic panels from the Bromley branch, which were designed by students at Goldsmiths University. They depict different styles of architecture from London. The relief panels installed at the West Ealing branch look to the future for their subject matter rather than the past. Sculptor Liz McKilnock used resin reinforced with fiberglass to create a hopeful scene of children playing among trees. A similar theme of children throughout the ages was chosen for Farnham a decade later, when it opened in July 1993. But this relief, cast in bronze by David Backhouse, was unusual in that it was originally sited inside the branch's main entrance rather than on an exterior wall. As branches grew ever larger in the late 1980s and 1990s, architects recognised a greater need to enliven expanses of plain brickwork with art. In August 1994, at Wallingham in Surrey, customers were welcomed by a splash of colour at the entrance, where a 155,000-piece mosaic charts the changes in Sainsbury's through its 125-year history. The same technique was also used in Biggleswade to produce a vibrant composition showing local bird life when the shop opened in the same year. At other branches, artists used the ubiquitous brickwork in their designs. Examples include the branch at Wilmslow, which installed an artwork 80 feet by 8 feet called The Legend of the Iron Gates. When the store was extended in 1988, a large area of plain brickwork was left facing the main road. Sainsbury's commissioned Judith Bluck, a well-known sculptor, to design and produce a brick sculpture for this area. It illustrates a local legend about the Wizard of Alderley Edge. In this story, a local farmer is offered a large sum of money for his horse by a wizard he encounters on his way to market. Thinking he could get more for the horse at market, he rejects the wizard's offer. The wizard tells him that if he isn't successful at the market that day, he should return to this spot and he will buy the animal from him. Unsurprisingly, the farmer has no takers at the market that day, and when returning home, he encounters the wizard and agrees to sell him the horse. The wizard invites him into a magical space underground, where he shows him an army of sleeping knights, all with a horse bar one. Although now the wizard has purchased the missing horse, this army is ready to fight for the earth when needed. On this panel, even though it's a terrible photograph, you can clearly make out the farmer leading his horse to the forest. Another example of artistic brickwork was from the Doncaster branch, installed in 1993. Here, a horse racing in the St. Leger Stakes is the subject of one of 4 brick friezes. The friezes also depict the town's coal mining heritage and the Mallard steam locomotive, which was built in Doncaster. Richard Kindersley, who is known for his lettering as well as his sculpture, created a piece for the Northfleet branch in Kent, which opened in 1992. The sculpture depicts the historic development of the site, from its Roman occupation through to the dominance of the cement industry in more recent years. The blue wavy lines on the sculpture represent the fresh spring water that was found on this site during the 19th century, which led to the cultivation of watercress, and the watercress picker is also featured. Although, as you've seen, murals and reliefs predominated over this period, Sainsbury's sporadically continued to commission freestanding sculptures. Unlike the work which stood in front of the Chelsea branch in the 60s, the concrete hippopotami placed outside Southampton's Lord Hill supermarket in 1977 presented first and foremost a playful image. Placed directly on the ground rather than plinths, they were made for clambering over by children and the occasional staff member. Although popular with the local population, like many types of public art, it was subject to vandalism. Unfortunately, trouble started within 2 weeks of the opening of the store, as people stole ears from the sculpture. JS Journal reports that the ears, the only weak point in the robust concrete and fiberglass effigies, have been glued back on several times, but such is the appetite of the local youth for natural history that they disappear as fast as they are repaired. Similar hippos installed outside the Wall branch the following year had ears redesigned to resist the attentions of vandals. Perhaps in light of this experience, it seems it was a while before the next freestanding sculptures were installed outside a branch. But by the late 1990s, there were several new examples, which can still be found today. Some are lifelike representations of human figures and animals with local meaning. To commemorate Ipswich's centuries-old association with the sea, Sainsbury's commissioned a statue that overlooks the entrance to the Hadley Road branch, which opened in October 1992. John Rivera, past president of the Royal Association of British Sculptors, came up with a 7-foot fisherman pulling in his nets bulging with fish. While in 1998, at the opening of the Calne branch, in an area of Wiltshire traditionally with a large wool industry, Sainsbury's reflected this by adding a sculpture of 2 sheep designed by local artist Richard Cowdery outside the front entrance. Elsewhere, there are more symbolic or abstract sculptures. When Sainsbury's opened the Pinho branch in Exeter in 1993, shoppers were inspired to contemplate a little philosophy. The 3 striking statues outside the store depict sheet metal figures running through grey monoliths of local granite. Their creator, Ray Smith, explained that the figures are shown running through granite, an impenetrable material with speed and fluency, a clearly impossible feat. The sculpture invites speculation at the way in which we set ourselves goals and attempt to achieve them, however insurmountable the odds. And to come full circle, in 1994, Sainsbury's returned to an organic, abstract sculpture when Cornish artist Max Barrett was commissioned to create his sculpture, Meeting Places. He also used granite in his work for the Truro branch, carving a 10-ton granite block into a sculpture representing the meeting of elements.